Good evening, everyone. I'm going to give it a minute or two before we get started to let everyone log in and the sound. It's the wonderful world of Zoom webinars, so I can see the number is going up. Recording in progress. So I'll just wait one moment. Let people get in here. But I also want to be mindful of time since this is an evening program, and we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Beth Fleming. I am Associate Dean of Admissions at Emory University, but more importantly for tonight, I am the co-chair of the Access, Inclusion, and Success Committee for SACAC. And so happy for you to be here, part of our college workshop program. If you missed any before, you can always go to SACAC's website. And we have been doing this series virtually for the past about 12 months. So there's lots of different topics and information is on there, and feel free to use the Q&A box. But I want to make sure we get the most of this evening. So I will turn it over to you. You have two wonderful professionals who will be able to address any questions that you have. So like when I was a teacher, I used to tell my students, if you walk away and you don't know the answer, ask the question. And so I'm going to turn it over to Ebony, who is amazing, who is a counselor at Whitefield Academy, and she will be joined with Lindsey Dean, who is my amazing coworker, not only through SACAC things, but also at Emory University. So I know Lindsey knows everything about college admissions. I ask Lindsey questions to this day. So I will turn it over so that you can get as much information that we can give you in this hour. So Ebony.
Thank you. So again, like she said, my name is Ebony Lovett. I am a current Associate Director of College Counseling at Whitefield Academy. Before that, I did work at a number of college admissions office, selective colleges and other colleges as well. And so if Lindsey wants to introduce herself a little bit.
Sure. So my name is Lindsey Hunter, and like Sarah said, thank you so much. I am Associate Dean of Undergraduate Admission at Emory University. And like Ebony, I've worked in a variety of capacities in the field. I've also worked as a college counselor on the high school side. I've worked in every way possible that you could help a student go to college over the last 20 years. And I'm really excited to be here. And let's get started.
Okay, so the whole point of this presentation tonight is to help students and whoever's else in the audience understand what holistic review means. And so we have here basically an infographic that shows all the different parts of an application. And throughout our presentation tonight, we will go over each part of an application and kind of help you see how it all fits into one for a holistic review. One of the ones you may see there's demonstrated interest. We won't spend much time on that because that is something that not all schools do, but we do want to let you know that that could be part of a holistic review at other schools. So the first part, and what I call a primary factor for an application, would be, of course, starting with that numerical number on a transcript called a GPA. And it's important to note that there's different types of GPA. So there's your unweighted GPA. That's on a basic scale of a 4.0. And that can include all of your courses, including electives. So that's your unweighted GPA without any additional weight. And then there's your weighted GPA. So your weighted GPA adds weight for AP courses, IB courses, Cambridge, which is ACE, dual enrollment, honors, pre-AB, pre-ACE, and that can be calculated differently depending on the schools that you're attending or the schools that you work at. And so that is additional weight added for those more rigorous courses. And then there's the core GPA, and that could be unweighted or unweighted, but core just means that these courses are only, this GPA is only considering your core courses, which are math, science, natural science, social science, and foreign language, and also English as well. So no electives are included, no band, no PE, none of that, but that will be your core elective or your core GPA. It's important to note that not all colleges are looking at the same GPA. So some colleges may look at only your weighted GPA. Some colleges may look at your core, and some do recalculate your GPA. A lot of them may recalculate your GPA. And so the GPA that the college has for you may not be the GPA that is reflected on your transcript. So it's important to ask the college rep that you're for the college that you're interested in to see how do they come up with the GPA, and what GPA are they primarily looking at for you.
That's a good point, because at Emory, we don't calculate the 9th grade in our recalculated GPA. We just go 10 through 12.
And so other primary factors would be that are part of your academic performance could be your grade trends. So I worked at a number of institutions where we looked at grade trends, and it was very important, whether you had a positive grade trend or a negative grade trend. So for sure, schools like the University of Illinois, I worked at Florida State, we all looked at grade trends. And so we like to see that a student is maintaining a steady grade trend or increasing their GPA over time, and if they're having a negative grade trend, that's something that we definitely would want to pay attention to. So that is important when it comes to academic performance. Another piece of it could be the grades in those core courses that I spoke about when I spoke about your core GPA. And so core courses, of course, are important, but it's more important if you're applying to direct entry programs, where if you're applying to, say, a computer science program or an engineering program that is very competitive, math and science is going to be important. If you're applying to Terry College of Business, well, not Terry, because that's not direct entry, but say Illinois College of Business is direct entry, math is very important. And so looking at those grades that you got in those core courses will definitely play a factor. And then rigor. So of course we talked about it, that comes when it comes with that weighted GPA. And so AP, IB, dual enrollment. Colleges look at you in the context of the school, the context of the classes that your school offers. And so most colleges will know about your school's profile or have access to your school profile. So they'll be able to see what your school offers. And we hope that students are taking full advantage of what the school has to offer, and whether that's the most rigorous courses in AP, or even if they don't offer APs. So you're looking at in context of what your school offers. And again, hoping that students take advantage of those rigorous courses. And then the last one is possibly class ranking. I work at a high school where we do not rank, but there are still colleges where that will take advantage or take into account of the class rank. So it's still important to note that for schools who do rank. One cool thing that I learned is last week is, and ranking can play a factor in that, and even if you don't rank, your students can benefit from that. But Georgia is now offering guaranteed admissions for students who are valedictorian or salutatorian in their class in the state of Georgia. And so that has a possible class ranking in that if you have a first or a second. But again, I'm sure most schools have a valedictorian and salutatorian. And so that's where class ranking can also play a factor.
So the next thing we want to talk about is the academic prep as it relates to testing. And a lot of times, some places, me and Ebony had this conversation a little bit earlier, academic prep and testing may not always be put together, but what I look at it is the numbers of your file. And so when we talk about holistic review and we're talking about reading beyond the numbers, testing is still going to have a numbers focus. And so that's why we included it in this portion on today. And so we want to first talk about ACT and SAT. Those are your standardized testing. Those are your board scores. And those are going to be general tests that offer nationwide, that every student in theory will have access to, and that schools will take as far as a test score. And then as Ebony was speaking earlier, I have the graphic here for IB and AP scores, and those are a subject test, a test that are school-based, and depends on the school you go to. You may have AP, you may not have IB, you might have both. And so I'll go a little deeper into all types of testing. The first thing we want to talk about is test optional versus test flexible. Like I said before, I work at Emory University, and this is our second cycle of being test optional. Previous to the pandemic, we were not. And testing was a very big part of the holistic review process, in addition to the grades and GPA and rigor. But now, understanding that everyone has not had the opportunity to test, the ability to test has lessened for a lot of students. And then some people just don't feel safe going into a situation where they have to test. And so we have at Emory taken a lot of care to make sure that we want students to have as much access as possible, and so has many other schools. And so that's now why you're seeing this influx of schools having these test optional policies. But understand that this has been around quite some time. Optional is when a school is not mandating that you send a test score. And so what that means is that you can apply to the school with testing, or you can apply without testing. Either one will be acceptable. Test flexible is where they might accept a variety of different types of testing. It doesn't have to necessarily be SAT or ACT scores. And so what you want to do first is know what is the policy of the school that you're attending. Is it a test optional school? Is it a test flexible school? And like I said, where I work at Emory, we are test optional. Also, you want to understand super scoring. And what is a super score? So you take a test. Let's use the SAT as an example. You will get a verbal score and you will get a math score. And so those two scores can add up to be 1,600. That's the highest number that you can get on the test. On the ACT, you will take 4 different subjects. It'll be a reading score, an English score, a math score, and a science score, with the highest being a 36 on each test, but your highest composite would also be a 36. What a super score is that we will take the highest from each subject area and combine those to create a super score. So let's say you get an opportunity to test twice. The first time you took the SAT, you got an 800 in the EBR verbal side, and the second time you got an 800 in the math side, but you did not get an 800 on the alternate side on the either test. Well, super score would mean you got perfect. And so if you submit both of your scores for both test dates, then the school that does super scoring will give you the ability to have the best maximum possible score that you can have. And so that's important to know. Some schools super score all the tests, some will only do one or the other. So if you have choice schools that you're looking at and you know that this is like maybe your first choice, and you want to see if they prefer a test one or the other, and that might help guide you as to which test you would want to take, if at all. Also, you want to talk about your score in context. Ebony was exactly right. Every school is looking at your context, look at what are the options that you have, what is available to you, and then they look at your score in the same view. There's something that some schools have as a part of their reading process, which is called landscape, which allows us to see what do students normally get in your school. And so when I was on the high school side, I've worked in high schools here, and I'm currently in Atlanta, and one school I know, if a student got a 1,200 or better, they would put their picture on the wall and they would celebrate that student, because in that school, a 1,200 or better was a very, very high score. And so we will have opportunity as your territory manager to know that. And so if we see that you went to that school and you got a 1,300 on the test, then we were like, oh, wow, this student is really doing extremely well. And so in some schools, though, if you were to go and take the test and get a 1,300, it might not be as celebrated as it would be, because in context, that score is maybe not as competitive. That is why it's important to not worry and compare yourself as much to others, and just recognize your context and what you bring and what the school traditionally has brought is always considered. Additional tests for specialized populations, and this would include international students. Sometimes students have to take language tests like TOEFL or Duolingo. Also, sometimes students will require subject tests, or they want to see scores if you are homeschooled. And so always be aware of what the testing policy is if you fall into any of these specialized populations, because it might be different than what it would be for a traditional high school student. And the last thing I want to focus on is the credit policies for advanced curriculum. AP and IB scores can sometimes get you credit in the college level. And so, for example, with AP, you can get up to a 5 on a test. Some schools will give credit for 4s and 5s, maybe 3 4s and 5s, but whatever the policy is, it's important for you to know what that is and to do your best as you are taking these tests. And also just remember, when you submit scores or when you give this information to an admission office, they can't unsee it. So if you share your scores with someone and you don't think that it's going to make your application shine, especially in an optional situation, you might not want to share the score, because if they are going to be able to evaluate you without it, then it might be best to leave it off. But if you know that it's going to really elevate that file and take your application to the next level, then by all means, definitely share.
So this is admitted student profile. These are examples of admitted student profile, and these are very helpful for students to see where they are when it comes to the admissions requirements for the school that they're applying to. It's important to also keep in mind that these are averages, so middle 50th percentile, and the schools have accepted 25% lower and also 25% higher as well. And so these are not the end all break all, and these are not the absolute numbers that you must have, but it does kind of give you some insight of what schools may be a reach for you, what schools are target schools for you, and what schools could be safety for you based on a middle school or middle 50th percentile. Most colleges may have this on their website. Some may be a little hidden, so that may be conversations that you can have with the college rep, like, well, what does an average student look like? I know over time it has become a little discreet, but most state schools and most colleges in general, from what I find, do have something like this on their website that you can reference.
One thing I would just want to add here as we're researching, and as like I was saying before about a test optional policy, I want to encourage students to not get too discouraged if the middle 50% seem to be very high, because what I just said, if schools are reporting this data, it's also based off of who reported scores. Generally, students that are reporting good scores. So that middle 50% might be of the students that actually reported. There might be a large population of students that did not report scores that are admitted, and so their score will actually maybe be a little bit lower than the range. So just also take that into account as you are deciding what you want to do. So next we want to go into letters of recommendation, which is a very important part of the application. Letters of recommendation are something that we look at in a holistic review process, is an opportunity for someone to vouch for you, to give us a different perspective of you, and we can see you through their lens. It really offers, highlights your academic and your community impact, which is important because when we're admitting a student and we're moving out of the numbers in the GPA and the rigor and the testing component, now we're getting a sense of who you are in light of all of these other more quantitative aspects of your file. So most schools are requiring one counselor recommendation, and that's going to provide school-wide context. That's going to help us understand the academic choices that you made. So before we were talking about rigor, and if you're taking the AP courses, or if you're taking dual enrollment courses, or if you're taking an IB or pursuing an IB diploma, the counselor can give us better context to understand why you chose what you did. Or maybe, for example, you took 3 years of a foreign language and you weren't able to take that 4th year. The counselor can say to us, well, they will have a conflict in schedule, and so there was impossible for them to be able to do both. And so then that lets us know, oh, the student didn't just decide to not go further with this, but it really is the student just had to make a choice and they chose to take AP English, lit, as opposed to take, AP French. It also helps us to understand your impact and context across the school community. So not just specifically in the classroom, but are you the person that administration goes to if they need something done? Do they see you as the mover and shaker in the school? Does your name speak volumes to people in such a way that, like, this is a leader, this is a game changer in our environment? And the counselor can give us a lot of insight to that. And so that's really important when we're trying to get the big picture view of the student, particularly in the school setting. On the teacher, we require 2 teacher letters for a common app and a coalition app. And so what's important to note here is, one, you want to pick teachers that are going to give you a very good rep. You want to make sure that these are people that are going to write favorably about you, and also, but they can speak knowledgeably about you. Core course teachers are best. I understand you might have great grades in gym and you might do a wonderful, situation in badminton, but is that going to be the teacher that's going to write the best recommendation for you if you're applying, direct entry into an engineering program? Maybe not. So you want to make sure that you're thinking through who you're selecting for your teachers. However, they're going to give us information about your intellectual ability and your engagement, what type of learner you are, how you participate in the classroom, how you react to setbacks. Maybe the material was very difficult and you had a little bit of struggle. The teacher can show us that process and give us a sense of that this is the type of learner that you want in your environment. This is someone that's going to make your classrooms flourish and that it's going to make your community even better. And so that's the type of student that we want to see, and a good teacher rec is going to give us that information. A lot of times we do get questions about, can we submit supplemental recommendations? And I say, if you are a student that is very actively engaged, maybe outside of the school, and there are things about you in your story as a student that needs to be told from someone else, then you definitely want to have a couple of supplemental recommendations, maybe people ready to write recommendations for you. First, you do need to understand the school's policy on accepting those, but you want to have people prepared. And so like for me, I'll use myself as an example. I was very, very active in my church when I was a high school student. There were a lot of things and a lot of leadership that I did that nobody in my school would have been able to speak to. And so it was very important for me to have someone be able to write a letter for me to give that additional context to my file. And so I would encourage students, if you are thinking over who could be my best advocates, you don't always have to look inside of the school. When we're looking at college recommendations, this is what we're looking for. Classroom engagement, first and foremost, we're looking, what type of student is this? Are they going to raise their hand? Are they going to ask the questions that are going to get a discussion going? Are they going to move the needle as it relates to how the peers in the class respond to the material? Are they that type of student? Intellectual curiosity, and we'll talk more about intellectual curiosity and personal qualities a little bit later, but this gives us a sense of what type of learner you are, and also the character of who you are. We want to know if students are resilient. High school is an interesting time. From 9th to 12th grade, you go through a lot, you mature a lot. And so we want to see through those letters of recommendation, those stories that'll really give us a sense of that journey that you've taken. And we want to understand your work ethic. Are you the student that's a go-getter? Are you looking for opportunities to grow, to do more, to learn more, to be of service? The letters of recommendation are going to give us a sense of who you are and understand what that looks like in the classroom and in the school building and outside. And also your potential. You all are still very young people. And so we recognize that you cannot have done it all. And so a person that is writing a recommendation for you can speak to what they can see your future looking like. This is a student that you want in your school community. This is a student that is going to really flourish and continue to grow in a way that is going to be amazing. And I support this student's admission into your institution. And a lot of times letters speak to that, and that is a really good recommendation letter. And then the last thing is just like, what makes you you? There's no form recommendation letter that's going to be, this is exactly what every letter should say. We want those individualized letters that give us insight to your personality, because at the end of the day, we're admitting you, the student. And so any letter that can give us a sense of your quirks, a sense of your personality, what makes you tick, what makes you laugh, what motivates you, is going to be a really good letter.
Okay, so this question is about extracurricular activities. So in a holistic review, when a university is looking at you as a whole, your resume or extracurricular activities can play a factor. And so it's generally it's another way of telling the college rep or the readers what you're doing outside of the classroom and who you are outside of the classroom. I have my students start a running resume as early as can get them, but mostly in junior or sophomore year, we're definitely telling them to start that resume if they haven't already. And they have a running running resume through Naviance, where they're keeping up with all the things that they have been involved with and running up all the way up until senior year, so that they can go back and reference through Naviance. Oh, I remember when I did that, I wrote that. It keeps up with that with them through time. And so it's been really helpful for them to go back and reflect, because oftentimes they forget things that they've been a part of or awards that they've done, community service events and things like that. And also it came into handy because a lot of schools on the Common App had sections where you can just upload a resume. And so again, it depends on the school that you're applying to, but within the Common App, there will be some sections where they will ask the student to upload a resume, and my students will already have a resume ready because Naviance will print the resume or will download it as a PDF for them. So there's no editing or tweaking that needs to be done. It makes it look nice and professional for a Common App. And so that's a good tidbit. And then again, it helps them track all the activities they've done. Also, just keeping up with how much time you've spent in the activities that are on your resume. Some colleges are very specific about how much time is spent. I've seen colleges ask, how much time did you spend on a specific sport? And it will ask them, how many hours per week or semester, and students are often flustered by that question because they feel like they have to do a lot of math, but I try to help them piece that together, but that is something to keep track of. And then also, when I worked for a university, we looked at commitment overall and not just a student who was in a whole bunch of clubs. So you don't have to be a jack of every trade, but we look for a student who is committed to a few clubs and they have become a leader over time in a club. So you've been part of student body for a while and now you're a student body president, that shows progression in that. Or if you've been on a certain team, key club, whatever, for a while and now you have a leadership role, that is more favorable than having 10 different roles or 10 different activities. And again, and then activities are not limited to clubs and sports. And on the next slide, it shows you things that can go on a resume. And so a high school resume can include a number of things. So clubs and organizations at school and outside of school. There's a lot of my students who are involved in things outside of Whitefield. And so we encourage them to put that there. Community service is also can go on your extracurricular activities, sports, jobs. Students may have summer jobs or just jobs in general, part-time jobs. If they have the opportunity to do internships through their J term or through their school during the summer or during Christmas break, that's a nice place to put them. Some students find the opportunity to do research with some of their science teachers or whatever teachers, put that there. If they're writing a book, whatever is pretty cool about them, that can go on there. Mission trips are popular, so putting that on there. And then any honors, if you're part of National Honor Society or any other recognitions, can go on there as well. And so extracurricular activities, again, paints a full body picture of who you are outside of the classroom and the things you're interested in outside of the classroom. And so the next part is, again, is the writing samples or essays or prompts, whatever the school you're applying to may call them. So we've heard them been called a number of different things. This is the one piece of your application that you can control at that moment when you're applying. So at that moment when you're opening up the application and everything is already said and done. So you've already been involved in all these things. You've already done the SAT or ACT, and you're already a senior now. So you can't really do much about your grades, but your essay is a right now piece. And so with that, again, colleges who truly read holistically will consider your essay as a high standard or a high ranked piece in your application process. It tells them a number of things about you. It also tells them your writing capabilities as well. And so spending time on the essays are important. So there's writing samples. Some schools call them writing samples or personal statements. So that tells a school who you are, what are your strengths and weaknesses, what are your values, what are any experiences that you would like to share with the college rep, what do you want from this college, or what do you want out of college, what are you looking forward to in college. But again, a personal statement paints a clearer picture of who you are as a student and what you would like that college to know. And then a standard prompt. So the Common App has 7 different prompts to choose from. Some of them are reflective, so reflect on the time that you've done this, or tell me about a time about this. Some of them are narrative, so tell us a story about something that you kept doing over and over. And some of them are engaging, and so you can choose one of them. You only have to just choose one, and it's 650 words. So that would be a standard prompt. Coalition does the same thing. You can choose one of the standard prompts they have. Most of theirs are more about your beliefs or things that are meaningful, values, things like that. And those are usually 500 to 550 words. And so again, taking time on those prompts, because some colleges are taking that essay as their only piece of writing for their application. So they're only using your Common App essay or your coalition essay. And again, that can go to several schools. So you can use that essay for all the colleges that will accept it on the Common App or the coalition application. And then there's college specific prompts. So when I worked at University of Illinois, we were big on our own prompts. So we did not even look at the coalition application essay or the Common App essay. We had our own, and they could be called supplemental prompts as well. And so a lot of the questions for those are like, why our school? Why are you applying to this university? Why are you applying to this specific major at that university? That is very important for schools where you're applying directly to the major. They want to know that you understand the major, that you know what you're getting into, and that you have a genuine interest in that major. So I always tell my students when they get this why prompt, and they're like, well, that is very broad. I tell them to research the college, connect your why with the resources or the unique resources that only that college may offer within that area. They all offer study abroad, so that's not really that unique, but if you find a specific program that connects to your why, you can use that in your essay and let them know that you're really truly all about their school. Mentioning traditions that they may have that you look forward to, any organizations and programs that they have that you look forward to, and basically let them know that you can see yourself being a part of their college. And so just be very specific. Colleges that really look at that, Georgia Tech is big on the why. Their actual prompt is, why do you want to study this chosen major at Georgia Tech? So that's a prime example of a why prompt. And then there's a Baylor prompt there. They basically ask the same thing. Why do you want to come to Baylor? What can you see yourself doing, or how can you see yourself contributing to Baylor? So that's another example of a why prompt.
I just want to add, at Emory, one of our questions is a why. It's like, what do you want to study? And then one of them also is, you have a choice. And one of the questions that's popular, the students answer, is what is a piece of not fiction work that you connect with? And you can pick a song, you can pick a play, a monologue, or something that you really connect with. And so that's a good opportunity too for students for us to really see you and what makes you tick in those things, those little interests that really will separate you from the group and show your unique characteristics. And so if you have an opportunity, or if that's something that you're interested in, that question, if you find a school that asks questions, because University of Chicago asks some really interesting questions that can be very creative. Don't be afraid to allow your creativity to show in those spaces.
And so these are just some resources for writing essays. So the College Essay Guide is pretty popular. You can go on his website. He has some free material that you can look at to see. Johns Hopkins also shows essays that work for them, but essays that work in general too, because you can just see, you know, what does a college essay look like if you've never even written one? Some students don't even know where to start. So that is a good place to just see examples of other college essays. And then College Board has some tips as well of how to do a personal statement or how to answer different prompts.
Okay, so as we move kind of away from the essay and kind of move into some more of the, if I will say, the philosophical realm of the holistic review process, and not something that is tangible on the application as all of the other parts that we have discussed up until this point. And this is kind of going to the heart and mind of the person that's reading your file and what they're looking for as they're making that decision. Intellectual curiosity is something that's really big, especially in highly selective admission. Schools are looking for students that are going to really bring something to the campus in the way of a scholarly approach, in the way of diversity of thought, in a way of just being able to have this interdisciplinary mind. And so especially speaking as a person that works for Emory, our curriculum is based in liberal arts education. And so when you're dealing with schools that kind of have those types of philosophies about education and their curriculums are set up in that way, intellectual curiosity is really important, because it really speaks again to the type of learner you are and the way your academic capacity works. If you're in a school that has liberal arts education, you're going to be taking classes from a lot of different areas. It's not going to be just a very pointed curriculum. And so we want to see a student that can thrive in all of these different subject areas. And so we can gauge that information, one, through the courses that you've taken, your academic prep and your rigor. If we see a student that's taken courses across all of the different core areas and have pursued rigor in all of those different areas, that shows a good amount of IC. If we see it in extracurricular activities, as Ebony said, it doesn't have to just be clubs that you're a part of. Maybe you did a summer program at a university, or maybe you're a part of an organization and you have some type of research that you've done. That speaks to your IC. Letters of recommendation is a really good place to get a sense of a student's intellectual curiosity, because teachers and counselors will speak to it and they'll say, this student asked the questions, and they're the ones that really set the tone in our class in a way that it's almost like they're a teacher's aide. And it's like, oh, wow, this student is going to be an asset. And again, in the writing samples, as Ebony so wonderfully described, giving us that information and taking the time to do the research about the school, making sure you understand your voice and that you're communicating that well, will then show us, wow, this is a learner, this is a person who's going to be a game changer in our community. The second part of this is also personal qualities. And so we reference them as PQs just for short. And so this is going to give a sense of the character of the person. And why is this important? It's because we are building communities. And so when we're reading a file and we're reading applications, we're looking at how is this student going to come into this community and enhance it and make it better and really kind of shine a light in a very positive way. And so you want students that are going to have high PQs, that are going to really give us those warm and fuzzies, if you will, in some ways. And that doesn't mean that you have to be, going around giving everybody a hug, because that's unrealistic and that's ridiculous. What I'm saying is that through the writing and through the recommendations, we see this as a person that would be a great community member, that will be a person that will come into the classroom, that will come into the residence hall, because many times students, might have to live on campus, and just in general overall campus experience, and make it a better place. And so this is just some words and some descriptors that we can find in the application to just give you a sense of what IC looks like and what PQs look like. It doesn't have to be just this. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just a really abbreviated kind of understanding of what the difference between the two. So if someone's being described as a creative and artistic, innovative and philosophical, then that says, oh, wow, this is a person that is, has a good amount of IC, as opposed to they're warm, they're diligent, they're hardworking, and that's giving us a sense of their character and the type of person that they are. But both are important and both are considered in the review process. I'll say really quickly as I move on, I was reading a file today and I was reading about a student, and there were a lot of wonderful things that I read in the file. But then I got to a part of the file and I was able to see that the PQs, or the personal qualities of the student, were not as high as maybe we would want. And that gave me pause. And so I don't want you to think that when we read holistically that we are just looking at the numbers and we're just looking at those things, because in that file that I read today, everything was gleaming until I got to that part of the file. And it was definitely an obstacle. So you want to make sure that you understand and appreciate all of this matters. Here, we have some helpful tips on our little poster board, and I'll throw it back to Ebony so she can go through some.
Yeah, so just to wrap everything up, this is our last slide, but this basically are some helpful tips for your students or for students that may be in the audience. So again, reminder to take advantage of what your school has to offer, whether that's AP, IB, dual enrollment, or whatever your school has to offer. Definitely try to see if you can take advantage of some of that, especially if you're applying to selective schools. Also, ask questions. So she talked about test policy. So definitely make sure you ask questions about what are the testing policy. Are you test optional? Are you test flexible? Just so that you understand the difference between those two. And then she talked about we talked about letters of recommendation. So definitely looking at who you would like to write your letters of recommendations. Will they think highly of you? What would those look like? Keep yourself organized. Write down the deadlines for the colleges that you're applying to. The average student, at least from my experience, applies to about 5 to 7 schools. And so with that, at least at Whitefield, but in general, the trend is about 5 to 7 schools. And so with that, you would want to keep yourself organized with all the schools that you are applying to and their deadlines, because they're all different, whether it's early action, early admission, early decision, all of that. You want to know what that is and what those deadlines are. Don't leave it to your college counselor to keep up with those deadlines. Have that yourself as well. Keeping track of all your activities and your involvement through your resume, or if you don't have a resume, you can just write it down somewhere, but it's great to have a running resume as well. And then some of the last ones are know where you stand with the middle 50th percentile. At schools that do have that on their website. That'll give you, again, good insight of, is this a reach? Is Harvard a reach for me? And so definitely look at that. And most schools will publish that. If they don't, they have admissions counselors, and you can ask those type of questions and they can give you their most honest answers. And sometimes that might not be what you're looking for, but you can at least ask those questions so you can get a feel of, is this a school that would be a good fit for me academically as well? And then make a positive impression throughout your application with the pieces that you can control, especially with your essay. That right now piece, as I tell my students, that is a right now piece. That is something that we can handle right now. So we're going to spend a lot of time on that right now.
The last thing I would say is to just make sure that you remember to breathe through this whole process. College application season is like an additional class. So if you're already taking a very rigorous schedule and you already have a lot of activities, and then you add college into that mix, it can be a lot. And again, working on the high school side, I've seen a lot of students come in, they're stressed. They're like, oh my goodness, I don't know if I can get it all done. It's a lot to worry, to think about. It's a lot to do. And just remember to breathe. It's important to just, take moments for yourself and just to kind of make sure you stay centered and balanced. This is still something that has to be done. And yes, it's very important, but you do also want to enjoy your senior year, and you do want to make sure that you are not so worried and so anxious that you're not able to function and just do what you need to do. So I think at this time, we're going to transition to questions. And so there is a Q&A box that you can ask questions on the webinar. And Sarbeth, if you don't mind, I just wanted to ask, one person asked a question in the chat, so I was just going to go ahead and answer Lisa's question with it. So Lisa asks, with the landscape concept, does it take into consideration historical test scores of members of the ethnic group of the student? So it depends on how, every student does not use landscape. Every school does not use landscape. So that's the first thing to note. Some schools have, depending on what their CRM is, some schools will have information that they have in their own system, and then sometimes they'll use landscape and sometimes they will not. What landscape does is give an overall view of what the percentiles are for students testing overall in the school historically. It does not get into a breakdown by demographics, a male, female, or racial ethnic groups or cultural groups. It does not really do that. Landscape is something that is able to help aid with the idea of context, but it is not necessarily a rubric. A professor of mine had curriculum as your guide and not your master. And I take that very seriously when I think about using something like landscape. in understanding test scores. Also, as a territory manager, as I'm currently reading files for the schools that I read, I'm very aware of what a good score is and not, because I'm aware of what is happening in my schools. And so it is important for me to be able not to just rely on some data that's compiled by an outside source, but also knowing from relationships that I have with personnel at the school, files that I have read from that school, to be able to have a sense of what benchmarks are for testing in that school. Again, it is just one small piece of the holistic process. So I don't, even if for Emory, I can say if a student were to submit testing, regardless of what it looks like in the overall landscape, I still have to consider all of these other pieces.
Right. And I'll actually jump in. This was amazing. So much helpful information. I have been doing this for years and I still learned something new tonight. So thank you so much. And Ivory asked a question about, will this recording be available? Yes, it will. And in fact, I will put in the chat box where this recording will be by the end of the week, as well as links to previous recordings and the topics that we've had so far. So feel free to come back, look at the recordings, share the recordings with other individuals. And if there's no other questions, I will thank you, Lindsey. Thank you, Ebony. This was so helpful. And I know personally, I'll go back and look at the recording, even some of the phrases that you use. I'm like, yes, I like that. I'm going to take that and make it my own now. So thank you so much, hopefully, for the guests that joined us tonight live. This was helpful for you and everyone who is watching it later. Thank you so much. Thank you. Good night.
Night. Thank you.
Good night.
Okay, that's everybody. Thank you so much. What we've realized is that people will sign up because we email them the presentation later. And so.
Oh, I see the cheat code.
Yes. And I'm mad we started doing that. We should have just waited to the end of the year and then just sent it out. But yeah, people will sign up and like, oh, we're going to get the presentation later. So thank you so much. And Ebony, hopefully you are seeing the Wednesday updates, because at the end of the year, I list, and so I guess it's next week, everyone who helped out names will go out in the email blast. So,
okay, yeah, I just found them. So I think I need to organize my email.
Yes. And so, yes, we will send that out shortly. And so I try to go on and make sure that I forward that to everyone's supervisors so that they can see all of the things that you're doing. And we will actually this year, I'm going to go ahead and put it on SACAT's website, all the names of everyone who helped out this year. So thank you. Have a great
Working with you, Lindsey.
Likewise.
See you around.
Yes, I'll be around. I'll see you tomorrow. Not physically. Are you in the office?
Oh yeah, I was like, where am I gonna be? Yes, 12 o'clock at someone count.
Are you in the office tomorrow?
I went in.
I'm in Cal tomorrow, so I'll see you on Zoom tomorrow. And Ebony, it was a pleasure.
It was.
To meet you. And if you need anything from me, don't hesitate.
Yes.
Because I definitely will be of service.
Yes, thank you. Same. Bye, guys.
Right. Have a good night.
Good night.